Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to St. David's School's radio productions of The Hitchhiker and War of the Worlds. Please take this opportunity to turn off all cell phones and other noise-making devices, settle down, and dim the lights. There will be a brief intermission between The Hitchhiker and The War of the Worlds. Please join us in a concessions area located in your kitchen. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy The Hitchhiker.
We of St. David's School reckon that a story doesn't have to appeal to the heart. It can also appeal to the spine. Sometimes you want your heart to be warm. Sometimes you want your spine to tingle. Well, the tingling will be quite audible as you listen to tonight's classic among radio thrillers. Its author is one of the most gifted of all the writers who have ever worked in this medium, Louise Fletcher, who also wrote the single greatest radio script ever written, Sorry, Wrong Number. The title of this, her terrifying little tale of gruel for this evening, is another spine tingler, by name, The Hitchhiker.
I'm in an auto camp on Route 66, just west of Gallup, New Mexico. If I tell it, maybe it will help me. It'll keep me from going crazy. But I must tell this quickly. I'm not crazy now. I feel perfectly well, except I'm running a slight temperature. My name is Ronald Adams. I'm 36 years of age, unmarried, tall, dark, with a black mustache. I drive a 1940 Ford V8, license number 6V7989. I was born in Brooklyn. All this I know. I know I'm at this moment perfectly sane, that it is not me that's gone mad, but something else, something utterly beyond my control. But I must speak quickly. At any moment, the link with life may break. This may be the last thing I ever tell on Earth. The last night I ever see the stars. 6 days ago, I left Brooklyn to drive to California.
Goodbye, son. Good luck to you, my boy.
Goodbye, Mother. Here, give me a kiss and then I'll go.
I'll come out with you to the car.
It's raining. Stay here at the door. Hey, what's this, tears?
Oh, it's just the trip, Ronald. I wish you weren't driving.
Oh, Mother. There you go again. People do it every day.
I know. But you'll be careful, won't you? Promise me you'll be extra careful. Don't fall asleep or drive fast. Or pick up any strangers on the road.
Oh, strangers? Don't you worry. There isn't anything going to happen. It's just 8 days of perfectly simple driving on smooth, decent, civilized roads with a hot dog or hamburger stand every 10 miles.
I was in excellent spirits. Drive ahead, even the loneliness seemed like a lark. But I reckoned without him. Crossing Brooklyn Bridge that morning in the rain, I saw a man leaning against the cables. He seemed to be waiting for a lift. There were spots of fresh rain on his shoulders. He was carrying a cheap, overnight bag in one hand. He was thin, nondescript, with a cap pulled down over his eyes. He stepped off the walk, and if I hadn't swerved, I'd have hit him. I almost did hit him. Now I would have forgotten him completely, except that just an hour later, while crossing the Pulaski Skyway over the Jersey Flats, I saw him again. At least he looked like the same person. He was standing now with one thumb pointing west. I couldn't figure how he'd got there, but I thought maybe one of those fast trucks had picked him up, beat me to the Skyway, and let him off. But I didn't stop for him. Then, late that night, I saw him again. It was on the new Pennsylvania Turnpike between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. It's 265 miles long, with a very high speed limit. I was just slowing down for one of the tunnels when I saw him standing under an arc light by the side of the road. I could see him quite distinctly. The bag, the cap, even the spots of fresh rain spattered over his shoulders. He hailed me this time.
Hello? Hello?
I stepped on the gas like a shot. It's a lonely country through the Alleghenies, and I had no intention of stopping. Besides, the coincidences, or whatever it was, gave me the willies. I stopped at the next gas station.
Yes, sir.
Fill her up, will you?
Check your oil?
No, thanks.
Nice night, ain't it?
Yes. It hasn't been raining here lately, has it?
Not a drop of rain all week.
Oh, no? I suppose that hasn't done your business any harm.
Nah, people drive through here all kinds of weather. Mostly business, though. Ain't many pleasure cars out on the turnpike this season of the year.
I guess not. What about hitchhikers?
Hitchhikers? Here?
Why? What's the matter? Don't you ever see any?
A guy'd be a fool to start out hitchhiking on this road. Look at it.
You mean you never see anybody?
Nah, maybe they get a lift before the turnpike starts. I mean, just before the toll house. But then it's a mighty long ride. Most cars wouldn't pick up a guy for that long a ride. This is pretty lonesome country here. Mountains and woods. You ain't seen anyone like that, have you?
Oh, no, it's just a technical question.
Oh, I see. Well, that'll be $1.49 with tax.
The thing gradually passed from my mind as a coincidence. I had a good night's sleep in Pittsburgh. I didn't think about the man all the next day until, just outside of Zanesville, Ohio, I saw him again. It was a bright, sunshiny afternoon. The peaceful Ohio fields, brown with the autumn stubble, lay dreaming in the golden light. I was driving slowly, drinking it in, when the road suddenly ended in a detour. In front of the barrier, he was standing. Let me explain about his appearance before I go on. I repeat, there was nothing sinister about him. He was as drab as a mud fence, nor was his attitude menacing. He merely stood there, waiting, almost drooping a little, the cheap overnight bag in his hand. He looked as though he'd been waiting there for hours, and he hailed me. He started to walk forward.
Hello? Hello?
I'd stopped the car, of course, for the detour. For a few minutes, I couldn't seem to find the new road. I realized he must be thinking that I'd stopped for him.
Hello?
No, not just now. I'm sorry.
Going to California?
No, not today. I'm going to New York. Sorry.
After I got the car back on the road again, I felt like a fool. Yet the thought of picking him up, of having him sit beside me, was somehow unbearable. Yet at the same time, I felt, more than ever, unspeakably alone. Hour after hour went by. The fields, the towns ticked off one by one. The lights changed. I knew now that I was going to see him again, and though I dreaded the sight, I caught myself searching the side of the road, waiting for him to appear.
Yeah! What is it? What do you want?
You sell sandwiches and pop here, don't you?
Yeah, we do in the daytime, but we're closed up for the night.
I know, but I was wondering if you could possibly let me have a cup of coffee. Black coffee.
Not at this time of night, mister. My wife's the cook and she's in bed.
Well, now listen. Just a minute ago, there was a man standing here, right beside here, and a suspicious-looking man.
Henry. Who is it, Henry?
It's nobody, Mother. Just a fellow thinks he wants a cup of coffee. Go back to bed.
I don't mean to disturb you, but you see, I was driving along when I just happened to look, and there he was.
What was he doing?
Nothing.
You've been hitting the bottle. That's what's the matter with you. You got nothing better to do than wake decent folk out of their hard-earned sleep? Now get going. Get on!
It looked as though he was gonna rob you.
I ain't got nothing in this den to lose. Now on your way before I call out Sheriff Polks.
I got into the car again and drove on slowly. I was beginning to hate the car. If I could have found a place to rest a little, but I was in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri now. The few resort places there were closed. I had seen him at that roadside stand. I knew I'd see him again. Maybe at the next turn of the road. I knew that when I saw him next, I'd run him down. But I didn't see him again until late the next afternoon. I'd stopped the car at a sleepy little junction just across the border into Oklahoma to let a train pass by when he appeared across the tracks. He was leaning against a telephone pole. It was a perfectly airless, dry day. The red clay of Oklahoma was baking under the southwestern sun, yet there were spots of fresh rain on his shoulders. I couldn't stand that. Without thinking, blindly, I started the car across the tracks. He didn't even look up at me. He was staring at the ground. I stepped on the gas hard, veering the wheel sharply toward him. I could hear the train in the distance now, but I didn't care. Then, something went wrong with the car. It stalled right on the tracks. The train was coming closer. I could hear its bell, its cry, its whistle crying. Still, he stood there. Now I knew that he was beckoning me to my death. Well, I frustrated him that time. It started. It worked at last. I managed to back up, but after the train had passed, he was gone, and I was all alone in the hot, dry afternoon. After that, I knew I had to do something. I didn't know who this man was, or what he wanted of me. I only knew that from now on, I mustn't let myself be alone on the road for 1 minute.
Hello there. Hello. Like a ride?
Well, what do you think? How far are you going?
Amarillo. I'll take you to Amarillo.
Amarillo, Texas?
Yeah, I'll drive you there.
Gee.
Hop in.
Mind if I take off my shoes? My dogs are killing me.
No, go right ahead.
Gee, what a break this is. swell car, and a decent guy, driving all the way to Amarillo. All I've been getting so far is trucks.
Hitchhike much?
Well, sure. Only it's tough sometimes in these great open spaces to get the brakes.
Yeah, I think it would be. But I'll bet, though, if you got a good pickup and a fast car, you can get to places faster than, well, say another person in another car. Well, you take me, for instance. Suppose I'm driving across the country at a nice, steady clip of about 45 miles an hour. Couldn't a girl like you, just standing beside the road waiting for lifts, beat me to town after town, provided you got picked up every time in a car that was doing 65 or 70 miles an hour?
Well, I don't know. Maybe she could, maybe she couldn't. What difference does it make?
Oh, no difference. Just a crazy idea I had sitting here in the car.
Oh, imagine spending your time in a swell car, thinking of things like that.
Well, what would you do instead?
What would I do? Well, if I was a good-looking fellow like yourself, I'd just enjoy myself every minute of the time. I'd sit back and relax, and if I saw a good-looking girl along the side of the... Hey!
Did you see him too?
See who?
That man, sitting beside the barbed wire fence.
I didn't see anybody.
Right there.
It was nothing, just a barbed wire fence. What'd you think you was doing trying to run into that barbed wire fence?
There was a man there, I tell you. A thin, gray man with an overnight bag in his hand. I was trying to run him down.
Run him down? You mean kill him?
I'm trying to get rid of him, or at least prove that he's real. But you say you didn't see him back there. You sure?
I didn't see a soul. And as far as that's concerned...
Well, watch for him. Watch for him the next time and keep watching. Keep your eyes peeled on the road. He'll turn up again. Maybe any minute now. There, right there!
No! How's this door work? I'm getting out of here.
Did you see him that time? Did you see him?
No, I didn't see him that time, and personally, mister, I don't expect never to see him. All I want to do is go on living, and I don't see how I'll do that very long driving with you.
Look, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. Please, don't go.
Now, if you'll excuse me...
Please, you can't go. Listen, how'd you like to go to California? I'll drive you all the way to California.
Seeing pink elephants all the way? No thanks.
Listen, please, just 1 minute.
You know what I think you need, big boy? Not a girlfriend, just a good dose of sleep. There, I got it now.
No, you can't go.
Leave your hands off of me, did you hear? Leave your hands off of me.
Come back here, please, come back. She ran from me as if I was some kind of monster. A few minutes later, I saw a passing truck pick her up, and I knew then that I was utterly alone. I was in the heart of the great Texas prairies. There wasn't a car on the road after the truck went by. I tried to figure out what to do, how to get a hold of myself. If I could find a place to rest, or even if I could sleep right here in the car, just a few hours, get some sleep just alongside of the road. I was getting my winter overcoat out of the back seat to use as a blanket, just as a blanket.
Hello.
When I saw him coming toward me.
Hello.
Coming toward me, emerging from the herd of moving steer.
Hello.
I didn't wait for him to come any closer.
Hello.
Maybe I should have spoken to him then. Fought it out then and there. And now he began to be everywhere. Whenever I stopped, even for a minute, for gas, for oil, for a drink of pop, a cup of coffee, a sandwich, he was there. I saw him standing outside the auto camp in Amarillo that night when I dared to slow down. He was standing near the drinking fountain at a little camping spot just inside the border of New Mexico. He was waiting for me outside the Navajo reservation, where I stopped to check my tires. I saw him in Albuquerque, where about 10 gallons of gas. I was afraid now, afraid to stop. I began to drive faster and faster. I was in lunar landscape now, the great, arid mesa country of New Mexico. I drove through it with the indifference of a fly crawling over the face of the moon. And now he didn't even wait for me to stop, unless I drove at 85 miles an hour over those endless roads. He waited for me at every other mile. I could see his figure, shadowless, flitting before me, still in its same attitude over the still and lifeless ground, flitting over dried-up rivers, over broken stones cast up by old glacial upheavals, flitting in the pure and cloudless air. I was beside myself, when I finally reached Gallup, New Mexico this morning. There's an auto camp here. It's cold, almost deserted, this time of year. I went inside and asked if there was a telephone. I had the feeling that if I could speak to somebody familiar, somebody that I loved, I could pull myself together.
Number, please.
Long distance.
Thank you.
This is long distance.
I'd like to put in a call to my home to Brooklyn, New York. I'm Ronald Adams. The number is Beechwood 9970.
Thank you. Thank you. What is your number?
My number? It's 312.
Albuquerque, New York for Gallup. New York, Gallup, New Mexico, calling Beechwood 9970.
I'd read somewhere that love could banish demons. It was in the middle of the morning. I knew Mother'd be home. I pictured her tall, white-haired, in her crisp house dress, going about her tasks. It'd be enough, I thought, just to hear the even calmness of her voice.
Will you please deposit $3.85 for the first 3 minutes? When you've deposited $1.50, will you wait until I have collected the money? All right, deposit another $1.50. Will you please deposit the remaining 85 cents? Ready with Brooklyn. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Hello, Adams residence.
Hello, Mother?
This is Mrs. Adams' residence. Who is it you wish to speak to, please?
Who's this?
This is Mrs. Whitney.
Mrs. Whitney? Why, I don't know any Mrs. Whitney. Is this Beechwood 9970?
Yes?
Where's my mother? Where's Mrs. Adams?
Mrs. Adams is not at home. She's still in the hospital.
Hospital?
Yes. Who is this calling, please? Is this a member of the family?
What's she in the hospital for?
She's been prostrated for 5 days. A nervous breakdown. Who is this calling?
Nervous breakdown? My mother doesn't have...
It's all taken place since the death of her oldest son, Ronald.
The death of her oldest son, Ronald? Hey, what is this? What number is this?
This is Beechwood 9970. It's all been very sudden. He was killed 6 days ago in an automobile accident on the Brooklyn Bridge.
Your 3 minutes are up, sir. Your 3 minutes are up, sir. Your 3 minutes are up, sir. Sir, 3 minutes are up. Your 3 minutes are up, sir.
And so, I'm sitting here in this deserted auto camp in Gallup, New Mexico. And so I'm trying to think. I'm trying to get a hold of myself. Otherwise, I'll go crazy. Outside, it is night. The vast, soulless night of New Mexico. A million stars are in the sky. Ahead of me stretch 1,000 miles of empty mesa and mountains, prairies, desert. Somewhere among them, he is waiting for me. Somewhere. Somewhere, I shall know who he is, and who I am.
Today's performance of The Hitchhiker featured Will Duncan as Ronald Adams, Jade Gordon as Mrs. Adams. The Hitchhiker was voiced by Tom DeLoach. The gas station attendant was voiced by Mason Hare. The storekeeper was voiced by Isaac Bostic, and Abigail Pelton voiced the woman. Ryan Perkins lent her talents as the female hitchhiker, and Operator 1 was voiced by Cougar Teams. Operator 2 was voiced by Anna Oliveira, and finally, Miss Whitney was voiced by Caroline Rakestraw. Ladies and gentlemen, The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. We now know that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's and yet as mortal as his own. We now know that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small spinning fragment of solar driftwood which, by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as ours are to the beasts in the jungle, intellects vast, cool, and unsympathetic regarded this earth with envious eyes, and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. In the 39th year of the 20th century came the Great Disillusionment. It was near the end of October. Business was better. The war scare was over. More men were back at work. Sales were picking up. On this particular evening, October 30th, the Crossley service estimated that 32 million people were listening in on radios.
For the next 24 hours, not much change in temperature. A slight atmospheric disturbance of undetermined origin is reported over Nova Scotia, causing a low-pressure area to move down rather rapidly over the northeastern states, bringing a forecast of rain accompanied by winds of light gale force. Maximum temperature 66, minimum 48. This weather report comes to you from the Government Weather Bureau. We now take you to the Meridian Room in the Hotel Park Plaza in downtown New York, where you will be entertained by the music of Raymond Requello and his orchestra. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Meridian Room in the Park Plaza in New York City, we bring you the music of Raymond Requello and his orchestra. With a touch of the Spanish, Raymond Requello leads off with La Comparsita. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving towards the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Raymond Requello playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Plaza Park Hotel, situated in downtown New York. Now a tune that never loses flavor, the ever-popular Stardust, Raymond Requello and his orchestra. Ladies and gentlemen, following on the news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the Government Meteorological Bureau has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances occurring on the planet Mars. Due to the unusual nature of this occurrence, we have arranged an interview with the noted astronomer, Professor Pearson, who will give us his views on this event. In a few moments, we will take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, New Jersey. We return you until then to the music of Raymond Requello and his orchestra. We are now ready to take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, where Carl Phillips, our commentator, will interview Professor Richard Pearson, famous astronomer. We take you now to Princeton, New Jersey.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carl Phillips speaking to you from the Observatory of Princeton. I am standing in a large semicircular room, pitch black, except for an oblong split in the ceiling. Through this opening, I can see a sprinkling of the stars that cast a kind of frosty glow over the intricate mechanism of a huge telescope. The ticking sound you hear is the vibration of clockwork. Professor Pearson stands directly above me on a small platform, peering through the giant lens. I ask you to be patient, ladies and gentlemen, during any delay that may arise during our interview. Besides his ceaseless watch of the heavens, Professor Pearson may be interrupted by telephone or other communications. During this period, he is in constant touch with the astronomical centers of the world. Professor, may I begin our questions?
At any time, Mr. Phillips.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the planet Mars through your telescope?
Nothing unusual at the moment, Mr. Phillips. A red disk swimming in a blue sea, transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now because Mars happens to be at the point nearest the Earth, in opposition, as we call it.
In your opinion, what do these transverse stripes signify, Professor Pearson?
Not canals, I can assure you, Mr. Phillips, although that's the popular conjecture of those who imagine Mars to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely the result of atmospheric conditions peculiar to the planet.
Then you're quite convinced, as a scientist, that living intelligence as we know it does not exist on Mars?
I should say the chances against it are 1,000 to 1.
And yet, how do you account for these gas eruptions occurring on the surface of the planet at regular intervals?
Mr. Phillips, I cannot account for it.
By the way, Professor, for the benefit of our listeners, how far is Mars from Earth?
Approximately 40 million miles.
Well, that seems a safe enough distance. Just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, someone has just handed Professor Pearson a message. While he reads it, let me remind you that we are speaking to you from the observatory in Princeton, New Jersey, where we are interviewing the world-famous astronomer, Professor Pearson. One moment, please. Professor Pearson has passed me a message, which he has just received. Professor, may I read this message to the listening audience?
Certainly, Mr. Phillips.
Ladies and gentlemen, I shall read to you a wire addressed to Professor Pearson from Dr. Gray of the Natural History Museum, New York. 9:15 Eastern Standard Time. Seismograph registered shock of almost earthquake intensity occurring within a radius of 20 miles of Princeton. Please investigate. Signed, Lloyd Gray, Chief of Astronomical Division. Professor Pearson, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbances observed on the planet Mars?
Hardly, Mr. Phillips. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we've been speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton, bringing you a special interview with Professor Pearson, noted astronomer. This is Carl Phillips speaking. We now return you to our New York studio.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News, Toronto, Canada. Professor Morse of Macmillan University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, near home, comes a special announcement from Trenton, New Jersey. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Elizabeth. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene, and will have our commentator, Mr. Phillips, give you a word description as soon as he can reach there from Princeton. In the meantime, we take you to the Hotel Martinet in Brooklyn, where Bobby Millett and his orchestra are offering a program of dance music. We take you now to Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carl Phillips again at the Wilmouth Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Professor Pearson and myself made the 11 miles from Princeton in 10 minutes. Well, I hardly know where to begin. To paint for you a word picture of the strange scene before my eyes, like something out of a modern Arabian Nights. Well, I just got here. I haven't had a chance to look around yet. I guess that's it. Yes, I guess that's the thing, directly in front of me, half buried in a vast pit. Must have struck with terrific force. The ground is covered with splinters of a tree it must have struck on the way down. What I can see of the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor. At least, not the meteors I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder. It has a diameter of... What would you say, Professor Pearson?
About 30 yards.
About 30 yards. The metal on the sheath is, well, I've never seen anything like it. The color is sort of yellowish white. Curious spectators are now pressing close to the object in spite of the efforts of the police to keep them back. They're getting in front of my line of vision. Would you mind standing to one side, please?
One side there, one side.
While the policemen are pushing the crowd back, here's Mr. Wilmoth, owner of the farm here. He may have some interesting facts to add. Mr. Wilmoth, would you please tell the radio audience as much as you remember of this rather unusual visitor that dropped in your backyard? Step closer, please. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Wilmoth.
I was listening to the radio.
Closer and louder, please.
Pardon me?
Louder, please, and closer.
Yes, sir. I was listening to the radio and kind of drowsing. That professor fella was talking about Mars, so I was half dozing and half...
Yes, Mr. Wilmoth. And then what happened?
As I was saying, I was listening to the radio kind of half...
Yes, Mr. Wilmoth. And then you saw something?
Not first off. I heard something.
And what did you hear?
A hissing sound. Like a... kind of like a 4th of July rocket.
Then what?
Turned my head out the window and would have swore I was to sleep and dreaming.
Yes?
I seen a kind of greenish streak and then zingo! Something smacked across the ground. Knocked me clear out of my chair.
Well, were you frightened, Mr. Wilmoth?
Well, I ain't quite sure. I reckon I was kind of riled.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmoth. Thank you.
Want me to tell you some more?
No, that's quite all right. That's plenty. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard Mr. Wilmoth, owner of the farm where this thing has fallen. I wish I could convey the atmosphere, the background of this fantastic scene. Hundreds of cars are parked in a field in back of us. Police are trying to rope off the roadway leading into the farm, but it's no use. They're breaking right through. Headlights throw an enormous spot on the pit where this object is half buried. Some of the more daring souls are venturing near the edge. Their silhouettes stand out against the metal sheen. One man wants to touch the thing. He's having an argument with the policeman. The policeman wins. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's something I haven't mentioned in all this excitement, but it's becoming more distinct. Perhaps you've caught it already on your radio. Listen. Do you hear it? It's a curious humming sound that seems to be coming from inside the object. I'll move the microphone nearer. Now, we're not more than 25 feet away. Can you hear it now? Oh, Professor Pearson.
Yes, Mr. Phillips?
Can you tell us the meaning of the scraping noise inside the thing?
Possibly the unequal cooling of its surface.
You still think it's a meteor, Professor?
I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial, not found on this Earth. Friction with the Earth's atmosphere usually tears holes in meteorite. This thing is smooth, and, as you can see...
Just a minute. Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific. This end of the thing is beginning to flake off. The top of it is beginning to rotate like a screw. The thing must be hollow. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. Wait a minute. Someone's crawling out of the hollow top. Someone or something I can see peering out of the black hole to luminous disk. Are they eyes? It might be a face. It might be... Good heavens! Something's wriggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one, and another one. They look like tentacles to me. There, I can see the thing's body. It's large as a bear, it glistens like wet leather. But that face, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. The eyes are black and gleam like a serpent. The mouth is V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate. The monster, or whatever it is, can hardly move. It seems weighed down by possibly gravity or something. The thing's rising up. The crowd falls back. They've seen enough. This is the most extraordinary experience. I can't find words. I'm pulling this microphone with me as I talk. I'll have to stop the description until I've taken a new position. Hold on, I'll be back in a minute.
We are bringing you an eyewitness account of what's happening on the Wilmot Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. We now return you to Carl Phillips at Grover's Mill.
Here I am, back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmot's garden. From here I get a sweep of the whole scene. I'll give you every detail as long as I can see. More state police have arrived. They're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit. About 30 of them. No need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain is conferring with someone. We can't quite see who. Oh yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yes it is. Now they've parted. The professor moves around one side, studying the object, while the captain and 2 policemen advance with something in their hands. I can see it now. It's a white handkerchief tied to a pole. A flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, or what anything means. Wait! Something's happening! A humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from that mirror. It leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Good Lord, they're turning into flames! Now the whole field's caught fire. The woods, the barns, the gas tanks of automobiles. It's spreading everywhere. It's coming this way, about 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we're unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we will return to that point at the earliest opportunity. In the meantime, we have a late bulletin from San Diego, California. Professor Indelkoffer, speaking at a dinner of the California Astronomical Society, expressed the opinion that the explosions on Mars are undoubtedly nothing more than severe volcanic disturbances on the surface of the planet. We continue now with our piano interlude. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been handed a message that came in from Grover's Mill by telephone. Just a moment. At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead in a field east of the village of Grover's Mill, their bodies burned and distorted beyond all possible recognition. The next voice you hear will be that of Brigadier General Montgomery Smith, commander of the state militia at Trenton, New Jersey.
I have been requested by the governor of New Jersey to place the counties of Mercer and Middlesex as far west as Princeton and East Jamesburg under martial law. No one will be permitted to enter this area except by special pass issued by the state or military authorities. 4 companies of state militia are proceeding from Trenton to Grover's Mill and will aid in the evacuations of homes within the range of military operations. Thank you.
You have just been listening to General Montgomery Smith commanding the state militia at Trenton. In the meantime, further details of the catastrophe at Grover's Mill are coming in. The strange creatures, after unleashing their deadly assault, crawled back into their pit and made no attempt to prevent the efforts of firemen to recover the bodies and extinguish the fire. Combined fire departments of Mercer County are fighting the flames which menace the entire countryside. We have been unable to establish any contact with our mobile unit at Grover's Mill, but we hope to be able to return you there at the earliest possible moment. In the meantime, we take you... Just a moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been informed that we have finally established communication with an eyewitness of the tragedy. Professor Pearson has been located at a farmhouse near Grover's Mill where he has established an emergency observation post. As a scientist, he will give you his explanation of the calamity. The next voice you will hear will be that of Professor Pearson, brought to you by Direct Wire. Professor Pearson.
Of the creatures in the rocket cylinder at Grover's Mill, I can give you no authoritative information, either as to their nature, their origin, or their purposes here on Earth. Of their destructive instrument, I might venture some conjectural explanation. For want of a better term, I shall refer to the mysterious weapon as a heat ray. It is all too evident that these creatures have scientific knowledge far in advance of our own. It is my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose by means of a polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition, much as the mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. That is my conjecture on the origin of the heat ray.
Thank you, Professor Pearson. Ladies and gentlemen, here's a bulletin from Trenton. It is a brief statement informing us that the charred body of Carl Phillips has been identified in a Trenton hospital. Now here's another bulletin from Washington, D.C. Office of the Director of the National Red Cross reports 10 units of Red Cross emergency workers have been assigned to the headquarters of the state militia, stationed outside of Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Here's a bulletin from the State Police, Princeton Junction. The fires at Grover's Mill and vicinity now under control. Scouts report all quiet in the pit and no sign of life appearing from the mouth of the cylinder. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special statement from Mr. Harry McDonald, Vice President in charge of operations.
We have received a request from the militia at Trenton to place at their disposal our entire broadcasting facilities. In view of the gravity of the situation, and believing that our radio has a responsibility to serve in the public interest at all times, we are turning over our facilities to the state militia at Trenton.
We take you now to the field headquarters of the state militia near Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
This is Captain Lansing of the Signal Corps, attached to the state militia, now engaged in military operations in the vicinity of Grover's Mill. Situation arising from the reported presence of certain individuals of unidentified in nature is now under complete control. The cylindrical object which lies in a pit directly below our position is surrounded on all sides by 8 battalions of infantry, without heavy field pieces, but adequately armed with rifles and machine guns. All cause for alarm, if such cause ever existed, is now entirely unjustified. The things, whatever they are, do not even venture to poke their heads out above the pit. I can see their hiding place plainly in the glare of the searchlights here. With all their reported resources, these creatures can scarcely stand up against heavy machine gun fire. Anyway, it's an interesting outing for the troops. I can make out their khaki uniforms crossing back and forth in front of the lights. It almost looks like a real war. There appears to be some slight smoke in the woods bordering the Millstone River, probably fires started by campers. Well, we ought to see some action soon. One of the companies is deploying on the left flank. A quick thrust and it will all be over. Now wait a minute. I see something on the top of the cylinder. No, it's nothing but a shadow. Now the troops are on the edge of Wilmoth Farm. 7,000 armed men closing in on an old metal tub. Wait. That wasn't a shadow. It's something moving. Solid, metal, kind of shield-like affair, rising up out of the cylinder. It's going higher and higher. Why, it's standing on legs. Actually, rearing up on sort of metal framework. Now it's reaching above the trees, and the searchlights are on it. Hold on!
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle which took place tonight at Grover's Mill has ended in one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by an army in modern times. 7,000 men armed with rifles and machine guns pitted against a single fighting machine of the invaders from Mars. 120 known survivors, the rest strewn over the battle area from Grover's Mill to Plainsboro, crushed and trampled to death under the metal feet of the monster, or burned to cinders by its heat ray. The monster is now in control of the middle section of New Jersey and has effectively cut the state through its center. Communication lines are down from Pennsylvania to the Atlantic Ocean. Railroad tracks are torn and service from New York to Philadelphia discontinued, except routing some of the trains through Allentown and Phoenixville. Highways to the north, south, and west are clogged with frantic human traffic. Police and Army reserves are unable to control the mad flight. By morning, the fugitives will have swelled Philadelphia, Camden, and Trenton. It is estimated to twice the normal population. Martial law prevails throughout New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania. At this time, we take you now to Washington for a special broadcast on the national emergency. The Secretary of the Interior.
Citizens of the nation, I shall not try to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country, nor the concern of your government in protecting the lives and property of its people. However, I wish to press upon you, private citizens and public officials, all of you, the urgent need of calm and resourceful action. Fortunately, this formidable enemy is still confined to a comparatively small area, and we may place our faith in the military forces to keep them there. In the meantime, placing our faith in God, we must continue the performance of our duties, each and every one of us. so that we may confront this destructive adversary with a nation united, courageous, and consecrated to the preservation of human supremacy on this earth. I thank you.
You have just heard the Secretary of the Interior speaking from Washington. Bulletins too numerous to read are piling up in the studios here. We are informed that the central portion of New Jersey is blacked out from radio communication due to the effect of the heat ray upon power lines and electrical equipment. Here is a special bulletin from New York. Cables received from English, French, German scientific bodies offering assistance. Astronomers report continued gas outbursts at regular intervals on planet Mars. Majority voice opinion that enemy will be reinforced by additional rocket machines. Attempts made to locate Professor Pearson of Princeton, who has observed Martians at close range. It is feared he was lost in recent battle. Langham Field, Virginia. Scouting planes report 3 Martian machines visible above treetops, moving north towards Somerville with population fleeing ahead of them. Heat ray not in use. Although advancing at express train speed, invaders pick their way carefully. They seem to be making conscious effort to avoid destruction of cities and countryside. However, they stop to uproot power lines, bridges, and railroad tracks. Their apparent objective is to crush resistance, paralyze communication, and disorganize human society. Here's a bulletin from Basking Ridge, New Jersey. Coon hunters have stumbled on a second cylinder similar to the first, embedded in the Great Swamp 20 miles south of Morristown. U.S. Army. Field pieces are proceeding from Newark to blow up second invading unit before cylinder can be opened and the fighting machine rigged. They are taking up position in foothills of Watchung Mountains. Another bulletin from Langham Field, Virginia. Scouting planes report enemy machines, now 3 in number, increasing speed northward, kicking over houses and trees in their evident haste to form a conjunction with their allies south of Morristown. Machines also sighted by telephone operator east of Middlesex within 10 miles of Plainfield. Here's a bulletin from Winston Field, Long Island. Fleet of Army bombers carrying heavy explosives flying north in pursuit of enemy. Scouting planes act as guides. They keep speeding enemy in sight. Just a moment, please, ladies and gentlemen. We've run special wires to the artillery line in adjacent villages to give you direct reports in the zone of advancing enemy. First, we take you to the battery of the 22nd Field Artillery, located in the Watchung Mountains.
Range, 32 meters.
32 meters.
Projection, 39 degrees.
39 degrees.
Fire!
"140 yards to the right, sir."
Shift range, 31 meters.
31 meters.
Projection, 37 degrees.
37 degrees.
Fire!
"A hit, sir. We've got the tripod of one of them. They've stopped. The others are trying to repair it."
Quick, get the range. Shift 50, no, 30 meters.
30 meters.
Projection, 27 degrees.
27 degrees.
Fire!
"Can't see this shell land, sir. They're letting off a smoke."
What is it?
"A black smoke, sir. Moving this way. Lying close to the ground. It's moving fast."
Put on gas masks. Get ready to fire. Shift to 24 meters.
24 meters.
Projection, 24 degrees.
24 degrees.
Fire!
"I can't see, sir. The smoke is coming nearer."
Get the range.
23 meters.
23 meters.
23 meters.
22 degrees.
Projection 22 degrees.
Army bombing plane, V-843, off Bayonne, New Jersey. Lieutenant Voigt, commanding 8 bombers, reporting to Commander Fairfax, Langham Field. This is Voigt, reporting to Commander Fairfax, Langham Field. Enemy tripod machines now in sight. Reinforced by 3 machines from the Morristown cylinder. 6 altogether. 1 machine partially crippled. Believed hit by shell from Army gun in Watchung Mountains. Guns now appear silent. A heavy black fog hanging close to Earth, of extreme density. Nature unknown. No sign of heat ray. Enemy now turns east, crossing Passaic River into the Jersey marshes. Another straddles the Pulaski Skyway. Evident objective is New York City. They're pushing down a high-tension power station. The machines are closer together now, and we're ready to attack. Plane circling, ready to strike. 1,000 yards and we'll be over the first. 800 yards. 600. 400. 200. There they go. The giant arm raised. Green flash. They're spraying us with flame. 2,000 feet. Engines are giving out. No chance to release bombs. Only one thing left. Drop on them, plane and all. We're diving on the first one. Now the engine's gone. 8!
This is Bayonne, New Jersey, calling Langham Field. This is Bayonne, New Jersey, calling Langham Field. Come in, please. Come in, please.
This is Langham Field. Go ahead.
8 Army bombers in engagement with enemy tripod machines over Jersey Flats. Engines incapacitated by heat ray. All crashed. 1 enemy machine destroyed. Enemy now discharging heavy black smoke in direction of...
This is Newark, New Jersey. This is Newark, New Jersey. Warning. Poisonous black smoke pouring in from Jersey marshes. Reaches South Street. Gas masks useless. Urge population to move into open spaces. Automobiles use routes 7, 23, 24. Avoid congested areas. Smoke now spreading over Raymond Boulevard.
2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling 8X3R. Come in, please.
This is 8X3R, coming back at 2X2L.
How's reception? How's reception? Kate, please. Where are you, 8X3R? What's the matter? Where are you?
I'm speaking from the roof of the broadcasting building, New York City. The bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as the Martians approach. Estimated in last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along the roads to the north. Hutchinson River Parkway still kept open for motor traffic. Avoid bridges to Long Island. Hopelessly jammed. All communication with Jersey Shore closed 10 minutes ago. No more defenses. Our army wiped out. Artillery, Air Force, everything wiped out. This may be the last broadcast. We'll stay here to the end. People are holding service below us, in the cathedral. Now I look down the harbor. All manner of boats, overloaded with fleeing population, pulling out from docks. Streets are all jammed, noise and crowds like New Year's Eve in the city. Wait a minute. Enemy now in sight above the Palisades. 5 great machines. First one is crossing the river. I can see it from here, wading the Hudson like a man wading through a brook. A bulletin's handed me. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One outside Buffalo, one in Chicago, St. Louis. Seem to be timed and spaced. Now the first machine reaches the shore. He stands watching, looking over the city. His steel, cowlish head is even with the skyscrapers. He waits for the others. They rise like a line of new towers on the city's west side. Now they're lifting their metal hands. This is the end now. Smoke comes out, black smoke drifting over the city. People in the streets see it now. They're running towards the East River. Thousands of them dropping in like rats. Now the smoke's spreading faster. It's reached Times Square. People trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing 6th Avenue. 5th Avenue. 100 yards away. It's 50 feet.
2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling CQ. New York. Isn't there anyone? 2X2L.
You are listening to a St. David's School presentation of an original dramatization of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. The performance will continue after a brief intermission. We now return you to The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells.
As I set down these notes on paper, I'm obsessed by the thought that I may be the last living man on Earth. I have been hiding in this empty house near Grover's Mill, a small island of daylight cut off by the black smoke from the rest of the world. All that happened before the arrival of these monstrous creatures in the world now seems part of another life. A life that has no continuity with the present furtive existence of the lonely derelict who pencils these words on the back of some astronomical notes bearing the signature of Richard Pearson. I look down at my blackened hands, my torn shoes, my tattered clothes, and I try to connect them with the professor who lives at Princeton and who, on the night of October 20th, glimpsed through his telescope an orange splash of light on a distant planet. My wife, my colleagues, my students, my books, my observatory, my world. Where are they? Did they ever exist? Am I Richard Pearson? What day is it? Do days exist without calendars? Does time pass when there are no human hands left to wind the clocks? In writing down my daily life, I tell myself I shall preserve human history between the dark covers of this little book that was meant to record the movements of the stars. But to write I must live, and to live I must eat. I find moldy bread in the kitchen, and an orange not too spoiled to swallow. I keep watch at the window. From time to time, I catch sight of a Martian above the black smoke. The smoke still holds the house in its black coil. But at length there is a hissing sound, and suddenly I see a Martian mounted on his machine, spraying the air with a jet of steam as if to dissipate the smoke. I watch in a corner as his huge metal legs nearly brush against the house. Exhausted by terror, I fall asleep. It's morning. Sun streams in the window. The black cloud of gas has lifted, and the scorched meadows to the north look as though a black snowstorm has passed over them. I venture from the house. I make my way to a road. No traffic. Here and there a wrecked car, baggage overturned, and a blackened skeleton. I push on north. For some reason, I feel safer trailing these monsters than running away from them. And I keep a careful watch. I have seen the Martians feed. Should one of their machines appear over the top of the trees, I am ready to fling myself flat on the earth. I come to a chestnut tree. October. Chestnuts are ripe. I fill my pockets. I must keep alive. 2 days I wander in a vague northerly direction through a desolate world. Finally, I noticed a living creature. A small red squirrel in a beech tree. I stare at him in wonder. He stares back at me. I believe at that moment the animal and I shared the same emotion, the joy of finding another living creature. I push on north. I find dead cows in a brackish field, beyond the charred ruins of the dairy. The silo remains standing guard over the wasteland like a lighthouse deserted by the sea. Astride the silo perches a weathercock. The arrow points north. Next day, I came to a city vaguely familiar in its contours, yet its buildings strangely dwarfed and leveled off, as if a giant had sliced off its highest towers with a capricious sweep of its hand. I reached the outskirts. I found Newark, undemolished but humbled by some whim of the advancing Martians. Presently, with an odd feeling of being watched, I caught sight of something crouching in a doorway. I made a step towards it, and it rose up and became a man armed with a large knife.
Stop! Where did you come from?
I come from many places. A long time ago from Princeton.
Princeton, huh? That's near Grover's Mill.
Yes.
Grover's Mill? There's no food here. This is my country. All this end of town down to the river. There's only food for one. Which way are you going?
I don't know. I guess I'm looking for people.
What was that? Did you hear something just then?
Only a bird. A live bird.
You get to know that birds have shadows these days. Say, we're in the open here. Let's crawl into this doorway and talk.
Have you seen any Martians?
They've gone over to New York. At night the sky's alive with their lights. Just as if people were still living in it. By daylight you can't see them. 5 days ago, a couple of them carried something big across the flats from the airport. I believe they're learning how to fly.
Fly?
Yeah, fly.
Then it's all over with humanity. Stranger, there's still you and I. 2 of us left.
They've got themselves in solid. They wrecked the greatest country in the world. Those green stars, they're probably falling somewhere every night. They've only lost 1 machine. There isn't anything to do. We're done. We're licked.
Where were you? You're in a uniform.
What's left of it? I was in the militia. National Guard. That's good. Wasn't any war anymore, then there's a war between men and ants.
And we're edible ants, I found that out. What will they do to us?
I've thought it all out. Right now, we're caught as we're wanted. The Martian only has to go a few miles to get a crowd on the run. But they won't keep doing that. They'll begin catching us, systematic-like, keeping the best and storing us in cages and things. They haven't even begun on us yet.
Not begun?
Not begun. All that's happened so far is because we don't have sense enough to keep quiet, bothering them with guns and such stuff and losing our heads and rushing off in crowds. Now, instead of rushing around blind, we've got to fix ourselves up according to the way things are now. Cities, nations, civilization...
But if that's so, what is there to live for?
There won't be any more concerts for 1,000,000 years or so, and no nice little dinners at restaurants. If it's amusement you're after, I guess the game's up.
And what is there left?
Life, that's what. I want to live. And so do you. We're not going to be exterminated. And I don't mean to be caught either, and tamed and fattened and bred like an ox.
What are you going to do?
I'm going on, right under their feet. I got a plan. We men as men are finished. We don't know enough. We gotta learn plenty before we got a chance. And we gotta live and keep free while we learn. I thought it all out, see?
Tell me the rest.
Well, it isn't all of us that are made for wild beasts, and that's what it's gotta be. That's why I watched you. All the little office workers that used to live in these houses, they'd be no good. They haven't any stuff in them. They just used to run off to work. I've seen hundreds of them running wild to catch their commuter's train in the morning for fear that they'd get canned if they didn't. Running back at night afraid they won't be in time for dinner. Lives insured and a little invested in case of accidents. And on Sundays, worried about the hereafter. The Martians will be a godsend for those guys. Nice roomy cages, good food, careful breeding, no worries. After a week or so chasing about the fields on empty stomachs, they'll come and be glad to be caught.
You've thought it all out, haven't you?
You bet I have. And that isn't all. These Martians will make pets of some of them, train them to do tricks. Who knows? Get sentimental over the pet boy who grew up and had to be killed. And some, maybe, they'll train to hunt us.
No, that's impossible. No human being would
Yes, they will. There's men who'll do it gladly. If one of them ever comes after me...
In the meantime, you and I, and others like us, where are we to live when the Martians own the Earth?
I got it all figured out. We'll live underground. I've been thinking about the sewers. Under New York are miles and miles of them. The main ones are big enough for anybody. Then there's cellars, vaults, underground storerooms, railway tunnels, subways. You begin to see, huh? We'll get a bunch of strong men together. No weak ones. That rubbish, out.
As you meant me to go.
Well, I gave you a chance, didn't I?
We won't quarrel about that. Go on.
And we've got to make safe places for us to stay in, see, and get all the books we can. Science books. That's where men like you come in, see? We'll raid the museums, we'll even spy on the Martians. It may not be so much we have to learn before... Well, just imagine this. 4 or 5 of their own fighting machines suddenly start off. Heat rays, right and left, and not a Martian in them. Not a Martian in them, but men. Men who have learned the way how. It may even be in our time. Gee, imagine having one of them lovely things with its heat ray wide and free. We'd turn it on Martians, we'd turn it on men, we'd bring everybody down to their knees.
That's your plan.
You and me and a few more of us, we'd own the world.
I see.
Say, what's the matter? Where are you going?
Not to your world. Goodbye, stranger. After parting with the artilleryman, I came at last to the Holland Tunnel. I entered that silent tube, anxious to know the fate of the great city on the other side of the Hudson. Cautiously, I came out of the tunnel and made my way up Canal Street. I reached 14th Street, and there again were black powder and several bodies, and an evil, ominous smell from the gratings of the cellars and some of the houses. I wandered up through the 30s and 40s. I stood alone on Times Square. I caught sight of a lean dog running down 7th Avenue with a piece of dark brown meat in its jaws and a pack of starving mongrels at its heels. He made a wide circle around me, as though he feared I might prove a fresh competitor. I walked up Broadway in the direction of that strange powder, past silent shop windows displaying their mute wares to empty sidewalks, past the Capitol Theater, silent, dark, past a shooting gallery where a row of empty guns faced an arrested line of wooden ducks. Near Columbus Circle, I noticed models of 1939 motor cars in the showrooms facing empty streets. From over the top of the General Motors building, I watched a flock of black birds circling in the sky. I hurried on. Suddenly, I caught sight of the hood of a Martian machine standing somewhere in Central Park, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. An insane idea. I rushed recklessly across Columbus Circle and into the park. I climbed a small hill above the pond at 60th Street. From there, I could see, standing in a silent row along the mall, 19 of those great metal titans, their cowls empty, their steel arms hanging listlessly by their sides. I looked in vain for the monsters that inhabit those machines. Suddenly, my eyes were attracted to the immense flock of black birds that hovered directly below me. They circled to the ground, and there, before my eyes, stark and silent, lay the Martians with the hungry birds pecking and tearing brown shreds of flesh from their dead bodies. Later, when their bodies were examined in laboratories, it was found that they were killed by the putrefactive and disease bacteria against which their systems were unprepared. Slain after all men's defenses had failed by the humblest thing that God in his wisdom has put upon this earth. Before the cylinder fell, there was a general persuasion that through all the deep of space no life existed beyond the petty surface of our minute sphere. Now we see further. Dim and wonderful is the vision I have conjured up in my mind of life spreading slowly from this little seedbed of the solar system throughout the inanimate vastness of sidereal space. But that is a remote dream. It may be that the destruction of the Martians is only a reprieve. To them, and not to us, is the future ordained, perhaps. Strange, now it seems, to sit in my peaceful study at Princeton writing down this last chapter of the record begun at a deserted farm in Grover's Mill. Strange to see from my window the university spires, dim and blue through an April haze. Strange to watch children playing in the streets. Strange to see young people strolling on the green where the new spring grass heals the last black scars of a bruised earth. Strange to watch the sightseers enter the museum where the dissembled parts of a Martian machine are kept on public view. Strange when I recall the time when I first saw it. Bright and clean-cut, hard and silent, under the dawn of that last great day.
This is Rosemary Anders, ladies and gentlemen, out of character to assure you that The War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. The St. David's School's Theater's radio version of dressing up in a sheet and jumping out of a bush and saying boo. Starting now, we couldn't soap all your windows and steal all your garden gates by tomorrow night, so we did the next best thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed the airwaves. You will be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it, and that both St. David's School and the radio waves are still open for business. So goodbye, everybody, and remember, please, for the next day or so, the terrible lesson you learned tonight. That grinning, glowing, globular invader in your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch, and if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, that was no Martian. It's Halloween. Today's performance of War of the Worlds was voiced by yours truly, Rosemary Anders, as the narrator. Caroline Ross voiced Announcer 1. Announcer 2 was voiced by Alexis Chisley, and Announcer 3 was voiced by Chloe Jalcutt. Walker Coley lent his talents as reporter Carl Phillips, and Professor Richard Pearson was played by Joshua Meshmore. Jack Wells voiced the policeman, and Mr. Wilmuth was voiced by Alex Pettifer. Jack Piner voiced General Montgomery Smith. Vice President Harry McDonald was performed by our very own Peter Fox. Will Jalcutt lent his talents to Captain Lansing, and the Secretary of the Interior was voiced by Kaylee Wadsworth. Alex Pettifer voiced the officer, and Ben Romero voiced Gunner. The Observer was voiced by Jack Piner. Jair Chisley voiced Commander Voight. Operator 1 was voiced by Elias Bostic, and Nikki Nishat voiced Operator 2. Operator 3 was voiced by Caroline Williams, and Operator 4 by Jack Wells. Jack Piner lent his talents as Operator 5, and Tom DeLoach lent his talents as the Stranger. Additional crowd and ensemble voices were performed by Kaylee Wadsworth, Ben Romero, Elias Bostic, Nikit Nishat, Caroline Williams, Koger Team, Anna Oliveira, Caroline Rakestraw, Walker Coley, Caroline Lilly, Josh Messmore, Rosemary Anders, and John Stewart Leach. The St. David's School would like to give a special thanks to our corporate partners, Fred Smith Construction Company, Wilkerson OBGYN, GSC Surveying, Kane Realty Corporation, the Good People of North Hills, Davis Moore, Wake Orthodontics and Pediatric Dentistry, Trademark Residential, Quail Ridge Books, Baker Roofing, Williams Realty and Building Company, Wake Stone Corporation, Sage Dining Service, Bailey's Fine Jewelry, and finally, Montague Development. Directed by Mr. David McClutchey, assisted by stage manager Kennedy Rouser, sound engineers Mr. Eric Trelizzi and Mr. Tony Middleton, recording engineer Kennedy Rouser, and sound editing Mr. Don Slater. Special thanks to the faculty of the Fine Arts Department and to our amazing Fine Arts boosters. Our state-of-the-art sound studio was created by crew members Caroline Lilly, Redmond Smith, John Stewart Leach, Will Jalcutt, Chloe Jalcutt, Thomas Clark, Arden Smith, Walker Coley, Kennedy Rouser, and Jackson Rouser.